Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Dr. Finance Live podcast. I am your host, Dr. Anthony Criniti IV, also known as Dr. Finance. I have an amazing guest today, Christine Kane. She is the soul sourced entrepreneur, former musician, songwriter turned entrepreneur with an amazing book out. She's going to tell us all about her life today. So welcome, Christine. How are you, Christine?
I'm good. Thank you so much for having me. I'm really, really honored to be here.
Thank you. And an honor to have you here too, Christine. Christine is a friend of John David Mann, and John had requested her to be here, and she's going to be on Clubhouse tomorrow night on stage. So that's going to be great. So Christine, let's start out with a little bit about yourself. If you want to tell us in maybe 2 or 3 minutes or so, a few minutes, whatever it takes to learn more about who you are and how you came to this place.
Well, I'm probably a pretty unconventional story in terms of business ownership and entrepreneurship. I started the entire trajectory of finance business success began for me when I was working in a cubicle right out of college. And I wanted to be a musician. I had no idea that I'd have to learn about money and business and all the other things that went with it. I just knew I wanted to be a writer, a songwriter, and I jumped ship. I left my job the day they promoted me and moved to a different city and started playing music. And that little journey of becoming a songwriter, I did that for 15 years, released 7 CDs, a DVD, toured with people like Beach Boys, John Mayer, Nanci Griffith. Like I had a very, very successful career, but the deepest thing that I had to understand was getting out of my own way as an artist and recognizing that I had to create my own record label and build a business and hire people and get help. And that part of the journey was every bit as robust for me as writing songs was, and learning how to perform and be better at songwriting. And that led, I think part of what happened was that led me to do other things. Just the serial entrepreneur in me, when people started asking me to teach them how I did it, I started retreats here in Asheville, North Carolina, where I live. While I was still going on tour, I would stop home, do these retreats. That eventually turned into some online programs that I offered. And then when I was ready to stop playing music, I just took my chances and said, you know what, I'm going to start coaching. I'm going to really teach people what I've done and help other people in their businesses. And that turned into a multi-million-dollar company called Uplevel U. And it's sort of been what's been going on for the last 10 years now.
Thank you, Christine. So let's take it from the beginning. Where were you originally from?
I grew up in Fairfax, Virginia, outside of Washington, D.C. And
oh, cool. I didn't know that.
Yeah,
I went to GW.
Oh, you did? All right.
Yeah.
Cool. And then I went to college in Boston, and then came back home. I was working downtown in DC at Ogilvy and Mather at a PR firm. And that was when I realized I could not have a job. I couldn't work in a cubicle. I just couldn't have that lifestyle. And now looking back, so I have coached with some amazing coaches out there, including Dan Sullivan, and I've learned all about the entrepreneurial style. Like, so he teaches the Colby A index and really wants you as the business owner to know who you are. And as I look back on it, I think if anyone had done any kind of personality testing on me, any kind of work style testing on me, I would have been unhireable. Like, they would have just said, get the hell out of here, because you should not be here. And so it was only natural that I was going to go off and do something different. And I think a lot of entrepreneurs are like that.
Oh yeah, absolutely. So why did you pick Asheville, North Carolina as your main place to stay for what, 20 plus years, I guess?
Yeah. Well, I had heard about it from a lot of different musicians. I had been following the music world. I didn't want to live in a city or in the suburbs. And I've always loved mountains and nature and hiking. And I was always the one in my family who they would all go downtown to museums. I would always go out into the woods. And I was very drawn to it. I was only going to come here for a few months and take some songwriting workshops and that kind of thing. And I had a friend come and visit me. And I said to him, a real dear friend, I said to him, I don't want to go back. I don't want to go back to the city. I don't want to go back and get a job. And he looked at me and he goes, sit down. And it had never occurred to me that you were going to get into deeper things like choices around money and choices around business. At that time, it had never occurred to me that you could make a choice like that. Like you could really just say, I'm going to stay here and I'm going to really do this thing. I'm really going to commit to this thing. And that made all the difference in the world. And it wasn't just about Asheville. It was about choosing a path that was unlike, what was expected of me. Sort of, and when you and I, before the podcast, you and I were talking about your choice to leave academia and do what you're doing now. And a part of me, even though we were rambling on a little too long, but a part of me was like, that's a big deal. I want to hear more about that, because it's a big thing to make that choice. And a lot of entrepreneurs had to go through that at one point in their life. So it was a profound moment for me.
Yeah, and to add to our previous discussions, I was telling Christine about why I left universities and this and that. That wasn't a unique situation, though. I actually had the similar situation. I worked for Vanguard right out of college, the top investment company, and I loved it. I learned a lot, but I wind up leaving for the same reasons as you. I just said, I can't live in this cubicle. Like I need to work on my own and have my own business and make the decision. So
Yeah.
for similar reasons, I just 3 years I did it. You did it for a year, I think you said.
I
I did it.
I think it was like a year and a half. I think they were probably so grateful that I left. But I'm sure you were great at your job. All my top investment is Vanguard, by the way. I do the easy way out and just do the funds.
It's a great company. Yeah,
it is. It really is.
I should get paid for that at this stage.
Yeah.
I want to call them up for sponsorship.
There we go. There you go.
All right. Well, thank you, Christine. So, all right. Well, we have, I got a lot of questions for you. Figure about 2 to 3 minutes to keep it on point. First thing I want to do is learn about your books. So how many books did you write?
Well, the Soul Sourced Entrepreneur is my first book.
This book right here?
Yes. That book. Yes. This book right here. Yeah. So having been a musician, I had released 7 CDs, like I said, and a DVD, and all of that was great. And I got, when I started blogging as a musician, and I was right in between music and coaching. I didn't know I was going to start a coaching company, but I was offered a publishing deal at that time. And I chose to not write the book at that time because I felt like I wasn't ready to put my ideas out there yet. I didn't feel like I had matured enough as like what you would call a thought leader now. And at that time, I didn't even know that term. And so I turned them down. The other thing was I didn't want to go on tour anymore. You and I talked about it. I traveled, 265 days of the year on the road as a musician. And so what I did was I just realized I wanted to put my money where my mouth was and really start teaching other people what I had done in music, help, watch myself grow a company, help other people grow their businesses, and then put all of that to the test. And that's ultimately what ended up as this book. And this Soul Sourced Entrepreneur is really about the mindset behind having a business, because so many people right now are solo business owners. There are more and more people who are not aggressive, who are more interested in having a purpose, who are maybe a little bit more sensitive or emotional, trying to navigate the waters of business. And that ended up being what I coached people a lot in. Like, yeah, the strategy, once you master the strategy, you can apply it. But when you have all these little things coming up, that's the stuff I really realized that's what I'm coaching people in. And that's what this book became about. And that, I think that's why it also took me a while to write, because it's not easy topic.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, that is your soul right there. It's your life experiences really pushed into one book, right?
Yes, it really is.
Yeah. And I really like this book. So I think the cover is beautiful. I'm really big into dissecting books, by the way. So the spine is really good. And, you got really cool testimonials too. So John David Mann gave a nice testimonial. He's the co-author of The Go-Giver, 5-time New York Times bestselling. Well, I think he's going on 5. He also gave a testimonial at the bottom of the book. So this is a really cool book, and the contents are awesome. I was looking through it. I mean, the idea behind this, well, how about you put in your words? Can you maybe in a few sentences describe this book?
Yeah, so it's called, the subtitle of the book is An Unconventional Success Plan for the Highly Creative, Secretly Sensitive, and Wildly Ambitious. And the funny thing is that when my agent and I were taking it to publishers, a lot of them didn't believe that this person existed, because business is usually hard hitters. It's usually left brain, data driven, very aggressive people. And because the doors have opened in our world, there's fewer gatekeepers and fewer barriers. More and more people are running businesses. And a lot of times what happens is they get into it, they start getting clients, and then they realize there's so much here. And if they are at all more sensitive, if they haven't learned the ways of business, if they didn't get an MBA, they can often feel like they're completely lost. And so I broke it down into 4 sections. And one of the things that we say here at my company, Uplevel U, is we say, I'm in. And I'm in was a mantra I chose for my clients, mostly because a lot of them, being graphic designers or hairdressers or realtors or lawyers, they got really good at their craft, but then they didn't know how to have a business. They didn't know how to market. They didn't know how to sell. They didn't know how to have systems or hire. And they would do this thing where they'd be like, I just want other people to do that stuff. And I would coach them. If they were in front of the room, I would coach them and say, okay, that stuff, you're pointing at your business and you've got your back to it. And so I started to teach them, you have to be in, like you have to be fully present to this thing. And in the book, what I did was I took I'm in and I turned it into an acronym. So the book is broken down into, the first one is initiating intention. That's the first section. So we talk all about intention and goals and how intention gets formed. And then in the second section, which is the M, it's managing your power. So how we manage our power each and every day is a lot of where people get thrown off. When you get rejected, when you get criticized, when a sale doesn't work, when a new thing, a new platform comes up and you've got to try it and you don't understand it. All of these things are about how you manage yourself as an entrepreneur. And they're very different from when you've had a job. And then the second I in I'm in is interpreting experiences. So you manage your power, things start happening, your intentions start shaping forth, and you have to be the one to translate the many things that happen each day. And most of us are terrible at this, especially if we are a little more sensitive or emotional, is that we tend to interpret things in a way that is a little dark or makes, we end up feeling like crap because of the way we interpret things. So I really teach people how to rethink and reframe circumstances that happen to show them that that circumstance is really helping your intention come to life. And then the N in I'm in is navigating decisions, because all we do is make decisions. That's what we do. We make choices, we make decisions. And that's all what then turns it back around, creates a new intention. The entire thing is just a constant movement in business. And so that's how I broke down the book, but I'm not sure if I even answered what your original question was.
No, that's perfect, because basically you created a system to teach your clients. Do you do corporate consulting too, Christine?
I don't. I am the person who catches the people who leave corporate and want to start their own business. And it's very easy when you're in corporate to be someone like I have some of my clients have been national sales directors, regional sales directors. And then it comes time to promote themselves and they go into like total panic, because it's like, it was one thing to stand behind the corporate name, but now it's another thing to start their own business. And so I'm the one who probably shouldn't go to corporate, because I'm it's going, start your own business, leave the shackles. So yeah, I mostly do private. It's all coaching for people who run their own businesses and companies.
Wow, that's amazing. That's really interesting what you just said. If you don't mind, can we just go into that for just a moment? So
Totally.
a lot of your customers are people who once worked for corporate and now are heading on their own. Why is it that you think that like CEOs, that these big companies, they're very one way, but when it comes to being their own personal brand, they're scared. Like it's like a totally different thing, but they were the boss of millions.
Yeah.
How's that even work?
when you think about what a brand is, when we do it well, a brand is very personal. Like if you've ever gone through a branding process, there's a personal aspect to it that really asks you, who are you?
Mm-hmm.
Who are you inside of this? Even I don't care how big you scale, there is a personal nature to a brand. And when you are high up in the corporate chain, you're in some ways, and I don't, this is not an accusation in any way, but you have the luxury of almost hiding behind a brand someone else created. You've got the name. Like one of the sections in the book I wrote about was leaving Ogilvy and Mather, and my own truly like complete panic because I wouldn't have that name. When somebody asked me, who are you, Christine Kane? I couldn't say, oh, I'm an executive at Ogilvy and Mather. I couldn't stand behind that. And when you can't stand behind it anymore, and the business is you, and you're selling you, suddenly imposter syndrome comes up.
Mm-hmm.
Panic comes up because you've never actually said, who am I? Because you've been hiding behind another brand. Like so many things can come forth, and you don't have the answer that makes your, average cocktail party participant look at you and be impressed, because
Mm-hmm.
you got to find out who you are. And you have to go through a little no man's land with that, because while you're building a business, you aren't that cool thing that everyone can be like, oh, wow, Ogilvy and Mather, or whatever your thing is, Vanguard,
Mm-hmm.
and or the university, whatever it is. People like to have a quick thing they can put in their pocket and be like, that's who you are.
Mm-hmm.
And so we're facing, I think, some of our deepest fears and demons when we start a business, and when everything is on us. And also when you're in corporate, you're not the one responsible for the income. You may have supervisors that you have to answer to, but at the end of the day, you're not the one generating all of it. So having a team of people, like I've had full-time employees, we had 9 full-time employees at one point. I now have more contractors than employees, but you're the one who is keeping that going and having that strategic mind. It's a different skill set typically from when someone is in a corporate environment. It's
Yeah,
similar, but it's all on you.
I asked this question because I think this is the essence of your book, which I'm fascinated with. And that's why I think you'll do great tomorrow in Clubhouse. A lot of my audience is entrepreneurs. And the thing is exactly what you said. Like, yeah, I worked at Vanguard. You worked at whatever that company's called, right? When they ask you that question, where do you work at? I work at Vanguard. I work at a university. But who are you?
Yeah.
Right? Isn't that really the answer? The real second question that comes up, who are you?
If
And
you're
that's what your book is
marketing
talking about.
well, yeah, if you're marketing well, that is the ultimate question. Like, and because I look at marketing not as a thing I don't look at it as like, here's your marketing and here
Yeah.
you are. I really do look at it as marketing is truly just communicating well.
Mhm.
And in order to communicate clearly, there has to be some deep diving going on. Even it doesn't have to be about who you are, but it's about why do you do what you do and what is going on here and who is your ideal client. I have something that I teach my clients. I call it the foundation 5, because it's the foundation that's underneath what I call the client matrix, which is how you get your clients. But the foundation 5 is what is the foundation of all of our marketing. I talk about it a little bit in the book, but I talk about it as marketing is sort of like the cupcake tins, all the things we do, whether it's Clubhouse or Facebook or YouTube or whatever it is, and us here.
Mhm.
But the batter is what I call your foundation 5. And that's who you serve, the message you teach, the results you deliver, the value you offer. And one other one, which I'm not going to come up with right now, oh my God. Oh, the problems you solve. So there we go. I know, really, it's there. But diving into that and really knowing it isn't a quick afternoon and a whiteboard.
Mhm.
It really does require that you look at each and every one of these elements, and that's you and that's your client. It's you and it's the person you serve, you and in your case, your listener, your fans, whatever it might be. And so that way you know how to anchor to something that they truly feel resonant with or relate to or whatever that might be.
Okay, thank you, Christine. So next question, just real briefly, just trying to figure out the one aspect of that book, which I know you focus on. Can you define what soul sourced is, or even if you want to take a stab at what is a soul?
Yeah. Oh, well, we could go on a long time on that one. Well, the word soul, I was actually very nervous to do this as a title because the word soul means so many different things to so many people. And in the business world, it can feel like this very woo concept. The way I look at it is that something deeper, ultimately something deeper is driving each of us. I don't pretend to know what that is for you or what that is for anyone else, but the idea of being sourced by something deeper than just ego and mind
Mhm.
is where I've seen this play out. Like for you having that moment of like, I don't want to work at Vanguard anymore. And then at university, it's not just an ego thing. It's not just a mind thing. It's not all top down. If we all look truly and deeply at our life trajectory, at our business trajectory, there is something that comes from up within, as opposed to what most of us try to do, which is we try to figure it all out. And what I find in our business paths that most of us are doing is that we're actually mining for something deeper rather than grabbing for something mental. And that's what it means. So it's like really being sourced by something deeper that's probably has a little bit more mystery to it, but then honoring who you are as an entrepreneur and building your business around that as opposed to trying to be someone else.
No, that's a great answer. It reminds me of the, I think it's an Asian expression that everyone has three faces, basically. One that you show to the world, I guess that's your persona. One that you show your family, your friends, and then one that you don't show to anybody. It's yourself, right? So really, the soul, we're kind of, in this case, it sounds like we're trying to get to the deepest root of the face that you don't even show anybody, and trying to learn that person, who that person is, and figure out what aspects about that person would really shine for the world. What does that person want to do, right? The person you don't show to anybody. How do we bring that guy or girl out? How do we bring that person out of us so that we can maximize our effect on this world?
Totally.
So maybe that's one way.
No, that's a great way to put it. And I think a lot of people have never actually asked that question. When you're learning marketing, well, like I did a rebrand on my company at one point, and I said to the guy I was working with, I said, this is like, it really is a deeply spiritual process when you're doing it well, because you're really asking, what am I all about here? Like, I know it's easy to try to be like everybody else, but what am I really saying here? And for some people, it's easier than others. But I do think if you're going to market well and communicate well, you have to do some deeper diving at some point. And most people don't like that part because it's uncomfortable.
Absolutely.
Just
Thank you,
hold
Christine.
on. I'm going to mute myself while my
Oh, go
dog
ahead.
gets
Take care.
upset at the mailman.
Okay.
Okay, my dog hates the mailman. She stands up here. She doesn't hate him enough to go down and like do anything, but she's going to bark at him and tell him she doesn't like him. The joys of working from home.
That's why some people have pets that don't talk. I have a pet snake. Doesn't bark.
Awesome.
All right. So the next question, we're going to go into a little different topic.
Okay.
Why did you decide to switch from being a full-time singer to a full-time entrepreneur? So we had a conversation earlier. My thoughts is that you only leave something you love if either you have no choice or you love something else, right? So from the little conversation that we had earlier and just a few interviews I listened about yourself, I suspect, because I think we have a lot in common, I suspect that you left it because you might be a writer at heart or an educator at heart, and your real passion was actually not singing, as you might have thought when you left your first corporation, but writing or educating. Am I on the right track with that?
So when I first left the PR thing, music was a passion, but writing has always been a passion. And I would actually add a third option to those two options you just presented, why people change. Because I do, this really is where living, like walking my talk, the soul sourced thing. I think sometimes there's a mystery to what calls us. It's not always going to be a thing I'm going to or a thing I'm leaving behind. I do teach that there's intention from and intention toward, and you just basically said that. But I do think that sometimes things call us out. And for me, playing music, there was a combination of things. I didn't actually leave music until 2010, but I knew I was going to leave starting in about 2005. And what had happened was I just got this sense that I wasn't going to be doing this forever, that there was more like things were opening up inside of me more. People kept coming up to me and saying things after my shows. Like my shows were not like, I never talked about any of this kind of stuff on the stage. I was strictly an artist. People kept coming up to me and saying, I want to start a business and I want you to talk me through some of what you go through. Like after I signed CDs and you know, that kind of like weird little questions like that. And I'd always sort of be like, oh, interesting. Okay. And that grew into other stuff and it sort of evolved. And what I did was I set that intention in 2005. And what I did was watched what opened up. I didn't just say, I'm going to go for it. I set the intention and then that started happening. I discovered blogging and I started blogging. Things started going in really very almost mysterious directions. And so that would be what I would say the third option was. But I actually have a podcast as well. It's called The Soul Sourced Business. And I have 2 episodes where I walk through the changes people go through. And one of them is called The Breakdown Before the Breakthrough. And then one of them is called Reinventing Yourself, on reinventing yourself. And what I describe in that is that a lot of people ask that same question is like, how did you go from music to running a company? And it's not as much of a leap as you might think when I describe what started happening. And as a musician, I always felt that art is a service-based career. I always thought that art is a service profession. If you're doing it well, you might not go on stage saying that, but you're truly up leveling, to use my word, the people who are in the audience in some way or another. You might not think that way, but that's what they're there for. So I don't see it as big of a leap as a lot of other people did at the time.
No, it's very similar. I mean, actually, you weren't just a singer. Interestingly, you were a songwriter. I listened to a few of your songs. They're really, really cool.
Thank
And
you.
it's not just like you're not like just like singing like to hear the voice. You're also you have kind of this Bob Dylan effect where you're actually you have the songs which are deep. Like there's a writing component to that.
Thank
And then
you.
you went to blogging. It's writing again. So
Yeah.
here we go. Now you got a book. I mean, the writing themes seem to be going all the way through. And if you look, and the reason I can detect this is because I went through the same thing. Like I was a financial advisor, right? At Vanguard, consultant, retirement specialist, had my own business, all finance, but then a professor for 10 years. But I ended up here, even though they were similar trends, they weren't my final destination.
Yeah.
They felt like the final destination at every point. I didn't know the future, right? I thought it was the end, but it wasn't. It was part of that journey for something bigger where we both went through to get where we're at today.
I
So,
think
right.
that what you just said, that what you just described is key, is that the journey just never ends. And you let your business, and I know this is going to sound a little woo, maybe for some of your audience, but I always say that your business is the territory for your soul's expansion, meaning you keep expanding. It's not like an upward thing. You just keep opening up to more and more. And it starts to become, how good can this get? But you have to take those first scary steps, as I'm sure you experienced.
Can you say that again? I love that sentence. You just said your business is the
Is the
territory.
territory for your soul's expansion.
Oh,
There's
that's great.
in
That's
the front
great.
of the book, I have something I call the new ops manual, and that's actually one of the it's the very first one. Your business is the playing field for your soul's expansion. So page 14.
Wow.
Yeah,
I
that's
really like that quote. I'm going to put that on the description when I put this podcast
yes,
up.
and that's what you're describing, is that we all want to reach some destination and land there and just drink margaritas and sit back and never do anything. And most of us, especially entrepreneurs, will be bored off our ass within 2 weeks. But if you just keep opening up and letting your life talk to you, or your business talk to you, you're going to find the next new direction. Sort of like what you did with Clubhouse. Door open. Okay, I'm going through. Here we go. And now, boom, you're ginormous. So it's part of what our own expansion and where we're called to go. But you got to start somewhere. And so you started as a financial advisor. I started as a songwriter.
Yeah. And talking about that last point you just made, I was actually a retirement specialist first at Vanguard. So for 3 years, I heard people's problems about wanting to retire. And people who actually retired. And the sad reality is that most people who retire and do like you did and that you describe, where they sit on a beach and just drink margaritas and do nothing, they die in 6 months or less.
Really?
Because like they're literally, the mind has to keep active, and that's not the, for some reason or other, people lose their purpose. And we'll talk about that in a bit. But when they get to that point, they forgot the key element. You need to have a purpose.
Dan Sullivan, he's 70, I think he's 76, 77 now, and he's still running and strategic coach. And he doesn't want to retire. And he says that this is his quote. I don't know for sure, but he says retirement is for people who have run out of their future.
I like that.
And he doesn't want to run out of future. So that's how he does it. So yeah, it's good way to look at it.
That's awesome. Thank you, Christine. Okay. Oh, before I do that, can you just like briefly describe what was it like? I'm curious about this. 15 years on the road. So I was an online professor. I actually had the opposite experience. I was teaching online. People thought I was crazy. They didn't even understand what that was before COVID. They're like, you can teach online? So
now everybody does,
everything was virtual. You had the opposite. You're all over the place. So how did that work out? Like being 15 years plus on the road? What was that like?
You start looking like Keith Richards at about the age of 35. Even when you start getting successful and can afford good hotels and that sort of thing, the road is just hard. And it's just, I'm a homebody. Like when we started working from home, and this is what you're looking at behind me. I really treasure it. The good thing about being on the road though, is you meet so many people. And I think that's why I started getting good at reading people and coaching and helping people, because I met so many people, and I learned so much about human behavior and about what people are looking for. And I was somebody who talked with people quite a bit. And the other thing is that trust builds up. Like when I had fans, they would come every time I came to town, and they would tell me things like, this is like church for us, coming to see you. And like it's not like online where you have to work a lot harder. When someone anchors into you and you're on stage and you've moved them in one evening, that becomes a pretty strong fan at that point. And you realize that's a very powerful role to play. And so it taught me a lot about, again, that thing I talked about with the soul-sourced entrepreneur, managing my own power, like not taking for granted, and understanding that it's very important who shows up. And so I learned a lot about my own energy, my own intention as I stepped on a stage, how to travel well, how to take care of myself, and just the dynamic of being somebody who is an entertainer. There's so many elements that go into it. You're managing so many different things. But yeah, it's hard. It's not the easiest road to go. Part of why I wanted to stop was I realized I didn't want to be spending the rest of my life on the road.
It's fascinating what you've done, and I equate it to what a lot of the other people in my inner circle do. Like a lot of these keynote speakers that we had Mark Victor Hansen on a few weeks ago, I think last week or 2 weeks ago. He was traveling full time, and a lot of those type of guys, they've been doing it 40, 50 years. I think Dennis Waitley, I heard him on Clubhouse the other day. He said he was the second best flyer on Delta or whatever the airplane he was. I mean, he's 88 years old, I think. So, it's really interesting. They're not musicians, but they're speakers, sort of like yourself. It's on that microphone with a crowd behind it, and it has that similar effect that you're talking about, that anchoring in. Yeah. And it's a lifestyle for sure. So thank you, Christine. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
All right. So why are successful musicians able to resonate so deeply with their fans, possibly than other professions? And this actually follows the last point we just made. I had asked this question. The last few people we had on here were major speakers. So we had John Kovac, Daniel Burris, and we had Mark Victor Hansen. So we talked about why speaking and writing has this amazing noble effect on other people that like your average profession cannot have, because you could reach the largest audience in one shot. Musician is actually basically in the same category. So why do you think that you can resonate so deeply with your audience?
Honest to God, I have no clue. I would love to be able to say to you, here's the 5-step recipe that I followed. I can only speak to my experience, and I think this kind of ties in with the idea of ideal clients, is that I think that I stepped into my own journey so deeply, and it mattered so much to me that my quote unquote ideal clients, my fans, the people who resonated, because it wasn't everybody, you know, they could sense that. Like they could sense something about that. But I also think that, you know, you mentioned Bob Dylan. We can talk about all the legendary people out there. I do think that some people, there is a certain destiny that some people have when they come here. You know, like you look at someone like James Taylor and, you know, people who just, how could they have done anything else? It's not to say their life wasn't hard and they didn't go through their own struggles on the way, but I just think there is a calling that some people have, and it's not, I don't know. I have watched thousands of performers. I have opened for thousands of great names. I've been on stage with them, and I've asked myself that very question over and over. What is it? What is the magic thing? And I would point back to the soul piece. I kind of knew for myself, there was one point where I realized I don't think I'm here to be like that level of famous or that level of success in terms of music. But what I felt like the calling was for me was to grow, like sort of what I said, the territory of your soul's expansion, to keep following where the doors open, and to keep stepping out of any limitation and get out of your own way and grow as you go with it. And I just, that to that end, I didn't get real attached to my identity as a performer songwriter. But I think that some people, that's what they're here to do. That's it, you know. So that's a really lame answer, but that was the
No, that's
best I
good. It
could do.
actually makes more sense. It wasn't exactly what I was thinking about, but when you think about it from a deeper level, it actually makes a lot of sense because, you know, the person in the case where you just mentioned, maybe those people, that was their final destination of their soul. Like that was the true who they were supposed to be.
Yeah.
Through that expansion, that universe for them is tapped out. That's them.
Well, I don't know. Because they could take it. I mean, they're doing other things with it now. Or they're using their name in a certain way. You know, it's just I don't know if it's tapped out as much as that's where their arena is and will
Yeah.
stay. So
Well, like Shakespeare said, all is well that ends well. So we won't know officially where that
exactly.
boundary is until they're croaked, right?
And who knows what well actually is? Like
Yeah,
who
exactly.
defines what that means, you know?
Absolutely. Thank you, Christine. Okay, so how important are you having fun with these questions, by the way?
I am. No, you've thought this out. It's amazing. Like I'm glad when I go on podcasts, I'm honored that anyone's even like opened the thing and read it, because I know podcasters are very busy and they get a lot of books. So yeah, let's go.
All right. So how important is it for someone who wants to have a successful personal brand to learn how to emotionally connect with their audience followers? Maybe share some thoughts from the perspective of a musician.
Yeah.
Also talk about experts like academics who speak to the media. I put like robots. So let me just summarize this question again. We're talking about personal branding here.
Yeah. Yeah.
So to add that element of emotion to personal branding, which anyone who got publicity training learned that you need to inject emotion to really resonate. So from your experience as a musician, who the only way you could have been successful was to pour your heart out every time you pick that microphone up. A lot of academics, and you said you come from an academic family.
I do.
Unfortunately, the curse of many academics is they're too heady. And to tap into the audience, they have to be able to connect emotionally. They forget about that component of humanity that's so crucial. So why do you think that is so important for personal branding and to resonate with one's audience? And you have a very successful audience, bro. You got 125,000 email people in your
Well, we've been scrubbing the list pretty regularly, so I think it's actually down more like around 85,000 now. Just I want to be completely in integrity. I don't like lying about list size.
Okay.
But this year we've been scrubbing like crazy. So yeah, but it's still a good size. It's a big question. And so what I would like to do in terms of starting is let's remove the whole terminology around personal brand off. Because what happens when we have labels like I got to have a personal brand is that it's very mentalized. Like it's very much like, all right, give me the strategies to have a personal brand. And how do I inject more emotion? Some people, quite honestly, are never going to be able to be more emotional because that's not how they are.
Mhm.
Understanding who you are, I think, is the key piece of all of this. And when I say your business is the playing field for your soul's expansion, part of that is knowing who you are and self-awareness. So I think you can have somebody who's super mental, but can still connect to their audience, especially if they know themselves, simply because they're coming from a whole place. But I think we've gotten so addicted to ideas like personal brand, and we've gotten almost like you see so much falseness out there. And I know you
Mhm.
know this, like the Instagram stars, the fakeness, the all that stuff. And we're also like sick of it. We're morbidly sick of it. That I think when you can be somebody who really tunes in and is very real and knows who you are, then branding is the natural outcome. So you're asking me about my path with this. I didn't know what a brand was when I was a musician. I didn't know, I thank God I hadn't heard of like personal branding, that wasn't a thing.
Right.
And so I just was myself, and I learned by the feedback and by things that didn't work and by bad reviews and whatever it might be. And I just started to, you either fall apart or you go deeper and get clearer, and you're willing to let things go or take it to heart and redo it the next time on the next CD, whatever it may be. But it's an iteration. It's an iteration, it's an exploration, and that can be that organic process of who you are can lead you to where you do a branding session. And like I said, you're now mining for what's real, and you're mining for where you connect with your client or your ideal person, whatever it might be. But it's not some fake phony tactic that you came up with.
Mhm.
That's what I feel like people have looked for in terms of working with me. I don't know if that's true across the board, but we like people who are real. It's why we like a Gary Vaynerchuk, because he's just the way he is.
Mhm.
But I don't think Gary, even Gary V didn't start off knowing his personal brand. That was a term that came up much later, but he was already being himself. And we resonate with people who just know themselves, or we don't like them, but at least they're still in their, even when we don't like them, they're still doing their thing and in their power. So I don't know that I would start off with personal brand. I don't teach personal brand. I teach positioning when I teach marketing. So positioning is more like seeding and using copy to say who you are. But I don't like the whole idea of a big personal brand. And I just think it's made us all kind of like douchebags out there. Sorry. They're
Hey,
like,
this is PG.
sorry, edit that word. But
That's going to cost me $100,000.
I'll pay the fine for you. If they take you away, I'll come bail you out. Um, yeah, I don't know. I think like even watching you talk about your journey, there's a realness to it. You know who you are, and you also know there's parts of things that you're still learning and you're questioning. And I think that's what people resonate with. But fake and phony, and I've got a personal brand. It's fine to do some of it, but I think we put a little bit too much emphasis on it.
But what do you do with people, like you said, there are people who just aren't emotional, they're apathetic, that's the word. So what do you do with people who just don't express emotion well? How can they, like, I forget about the personal branding, but how can they
Yeah.
create a public persona of themselves for their business, and connect with an audience if they're lacking emotion, as the definition of apathetic is? They have no emotion. And
Well, as someone who's apathetic, I would have, if they were naturally totally apathetic,
or
I don't
low in
know if
emotion.
they'd be getting on stage, right?
Yeah, right, right.
So, but low on emotion, they could also, like, the way I would do it would be to say, let's, maybe have some humor about it. Like, meaning, here's what I'm not,
Yeah.
like add the little humor. If you're not going to go weepy, like, I have the, secretly sensitive thing going, but not everyone wants an emotional person. Like you can still resonate, like you can find what your gift is.
Mm,
But if we're always trying to like, oh man, I suck at this, I have to pretend to be more of this. And my thing with my clients is like, amp that up, like amp up what you're great at and make light of the fact that you're not great at this other thing that, you know, people have told me I'm not emotional enough. Well, there you know, like I would find a way to make that part of your shtick if you're at the point where you've got a shtick. But it's like, I don't think everyone needs you to be emotional. Just like I joke about, like, one of the things I learned with Dan Sullivan is I took the Colbys, and even getting prepared to work with you and we were doing our emails back and forth, I was in my mind doing your Colbys. Like I was like, okay, we're very radically different. But the Colbys are kind of how you work, how you instinctually naturally work and are wired. And Dan says this and Kathy Colby says this, but it's like, build your business around your natural instincts. So if you are a high data person and you are really into systems, then great. You might not be the one who's going to be like emoting out there, but really, really like unleash the beast is what I say when I'm teaching my clients about this. Be exactly who you are. But it doesn't necessarily mean that you're not going to connect at all if you don't do it emotionally. Some people are better at the emotional side of things and some people aren't. I think some of it is just being present. Like when someone's a robot on stage, I think they've exited their body. They've become their topic and they're no longer in their being.
And I hate to go into this, but coming out of my shell as an academic, I didn't know. I mean, normally I'm like this, but I thought when you step on stage or whatnot, they train you to act a certain way.
No,
And
I'm
if I
not
didn't
into
go
that.
through, if I didn't go through publicity training to see how you act on video and in public appearance, I wouldn't have made that connection as fast. That
Yeah.
like you really do need to kind of inject it. But to say what you just said was an excellent point. Even if you don't have any emotion, if that's your real true character, which it wasn't in my case, if you don't have any emotion, you can amplify that. Like just think of great leaders, right? Like generals of armies and stuff. They come on, they might not have any emotion. They seen too much in war to have emotion.
Yeah.
So, but they command an audience's attention immediately because of their presence. So if you amp that up, like you said, that would probably up their game.
Totally. And you wouldn't want someone like me in the military because I would be a freaking mess, you know, like we each have our thing that we're doing to serve. But this isn't to say you don't get speaker training or learn how certain things can work. But I think too many people are trying to be a Tony Robbins. And so they get out on stage and they completely go phony, like, whoa, we're going to amp you up. And you can tell when that person like, oh, dude, you know, that's great for Tony Robbins, but I can kind of sense that's not you and you're faking it, you know. And I'm more of like, so I'll give you an example. So I have the feels, I call them the feels. And some nights before I went on stage, I would just be faced with a massive amount of stage fright, a massive amount of emotion, and I'd be telling myself I had to get out there and amp up the audience and be someone I'm not. And that's the voice that says you shouldn't be how you are. And what I started to learn how to do was just bring that on stage with me, not to where I'm like bleeding my emotions on people, but I'd walk out on stage and I'd follow the energy. I'd be fully in my presence, like be there, and I would play I would open with a softer song, like completely, you know, opposite of what like Tony would say to do or whatever. And then I would move with who I was in that moment. And it would eventually lead into a very organic, great show. And I realized it wasn't because I was pushing myself to be other than I am. So there's a little fine line between understanding the tactics that make a good speaker and the connection that make you a good podcaster, and also really honoring your style and who you are.
Thank you, Christine. By the way, what's the most amount of people you performed in front of? Just curious. At one time.
Somewhere in the 1,500, 2,000. I did better though. My audience size was usually in the 250, 350 zone. And that's where I really, really thrived, anywhere in the 100 to 300 zone. Cause I'm a relator. I'm a connector. I like seeing people's eyes and I like feeling. The thousands always maybe I didn't have enough of that and I just couldn't get good at it, but I was never sort of like a hello Cleveland kind of, sorry, had a little Spinal Tap moment there, but I wasn't ever that kind of person. And I've always been sort of a connecting kind of person and a relating kind of person. And I like smaller audiences.
You're going to do good tomorrow night. That's about the size. We usually get about 200 to 500 people.
Cool.
So
great.
All right. Great. Thank you, Christine. All right. We're moving along. So What role has the struggle played in your life, both as an entrepreneur and a musician?
I think that we grow from our struggles. I am going to be one of those people. I've learned more from my critics than from people who just blindly praise me. I've learned more from things going wrong. And oddly, I've gotten really good at client service from the clients who hated me or who didn't really like what I did or whatever, because all of it definitely creates soul searching, but it also creates new directions, and you learn from your mistakes, and those struggles have been truly what has built what what I can really stand on as a strong foundation in business and in working with team and clients and my my team of coaches. And there's not a lot now that throws, I mean, I still have struggles for sure, but there's not as much that throws me as it used to. Like I always know that I can work with it, because I always know that at the end of a challenge, it's, again, I'm going to quote Dan Sullivan, our challenges are the raw materials for our next great steps. And that's a total paraphrase, but I really learned that in business, the stuff that doesn't go well are always the raw material for what's going to work. And that's partly what the book addresses, is that business is problems. If you're working with people, people don't hire you if they don't have challenges and problems. And so business is in service to the problems we have, the struggles we face.
So are you saying that if you didn't have any of your, I mean, think your hardest struggles in your life, if you didn't have any of those, you wouldn't be who you are today?
No, I'd probably be a big, massive egomaniac. Like if it was all just roses. I think we'd all be pretty clueless if we didn't get hit with struggles.
I'm on the same page 100%.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
I just want to hear your answer.
I don't like it when I'm in them. And whenever I'm coaching someone in them, they're like, this hurts and I hate this. And I'm like, I know. And it's so good. But, and we're going to get through it. But just know that this is really growing you. And it's always fine to be able to coach someone in that. But when it's you, it's like, God, I hate this.
Thank you, Christine. All right. So next question. We're going to get into some standard questions here. Figure about a minute or two for each.
Okay.
What role has networking played in your life?
I suck at networking. I'm going to just be completely honest about this. Networking has created some very strong relationships in my life, mostly because when I'm talking to someone, they're the only person I'm in the room with. And I don't do conquest networking. I call it, that's my name for it, where you have a list of people that you're going to go into an event, and you're going to get shit from them. I won't do that. I meet who I meet, and I connect with them. My dear friend Lisa Larder, who you should have on this podcast, she and I met at an eWomen network thing, and she wanted to stay in touch with me. And she still to this day says, I was the only person in the room that looked at her in the eye when I met her. And she said everyone else was looking around their shoulders to see if someone more important was coming along. And so my thing with networking is I go to really truly meet people and connect with people. But in terms of just, has networking been my money maker? It hasn't. And I just want to be honest. And I know it's a big thing for a lot of people, and I love that for them, but I've never been great at it.
Fair enough.
At least the way we define it in our culture.
Yeah, exactly. Like like you said, targeting certain people. I mean, your networking style seems to be, correct me if I'm wrong, people that are in your space. You believe the universe has brought them to you for whatever reason, and that's why you're going to talk to them one-on-one and spend real time with that person.
And I'm interested in people, but I don't want to try to see what I can get from people. And I get, that's I was in the music business long enough, and I've been at enough big showcase events and done those things that I saw the desperation in people's eyes trying to get things from people. And I no longer wanted to look at humans as something I was going to get something from. Yeah. And it's not to say I don't have those moments, but it's just that was a decision I made in music, was I'm going to be in front of who I'm in front of, and I'm going to see everybody for who they are.
And flip the table. I mean, you basically were that person. I'm sure a lot of people were like, oh, if I can only get an interview with Christine, or if I can get her signature, right? Because you were the superstar.
Or people, like, when you write a book, people think that you're going to help them write their book or make them famous or whatever. And it's like, yeah, I don't have that power, but go write your book anyway. So yeah, it happens on both ends of it. I don't mind it either way. It's just, I don't want to be looking at people for what I can get from them.
Makes a lot of sense. Thank you, Christine.
Mhm.
All right. So here's some fun question. Well, actually, one more. Is mentoring important? And this is fun too. Is mentoring important, and who are some of your mentors?
Coaching has been the game changer for me, and that's probably why I ended up doing it. My first coach was a guy named Tom Politico. He is no longer alive. He was one of Thomas Leonard's first trainees. Like Thomas Leonard started Coach U. He's no longer alive either. But he was one of the first coaches out of Coach U, and he had been an actor in New York City, a stage actor. He was I think he was the first person who really saw me as a musician, but I invested in myself, and it was terrifying because musicians don't invest in themselves. And it taught me the power of money, taught me the power of putting my money into me, as Warren Buffett would say. You are the most important investment you can make. It taught me the power of commitment. When you put money into something like that and you hire someone like that, you're more committed to your outcomes.
Mm-hmm.
It was the whole experience of it woke me up out of my own little I can do it myself trance.
Mm.
So I have since then always had some kind of a mentor, some kind of a coach. And the other one I would say, and I've mentioned a bunch, I worked with Dan Sullivan at Strategic Coach for about 6 years, 5, 6 years. And he was a really, really phenomenal person to watch and to work with his tools and to work with his coaches. But it's been a game changer. I would not be where I am without coaching.
That's beautiful. Thank you, Christine. And I totally agree. All right. So we're going to switch into, I'm glad you brought up that concept about investing yourself from Warren Buffett. Extremely important. I told you we'd have some relevance to what you do. So here comes the finance part, right? Investing.
Yes.
All right. So talking about finance, what are your favorite financial books?
Oh,
By the way, have you gotten a copy of mine?
I have your books. Yes. And that's why I was like terrified to get on this podcast because you're so freaking smart. And I'm like, oh my God, I'm going to be like the dumb person on the podcast. No, yeah, my favorite finance books besides yours. I would say the one that I read a lot and I have read a lot. I'm going to say that Cashflow Quadrant was a game changer for me because I was still a struggling musician. And it taught me the power of compound interest and not living off the money you make, but living off of your investments. And I was not even sort of prepared. Like I was barely even like I was, I had a successful music business, but I was, in the 150,000 range, when I was on the road all the time. But I started at that time, like slowly investing. And that book taught me how to think more clearly. And I remember one thing that he said in that book was that his wife, it might have been in Rich Dad, Poor Dad, but his wife bought a car with the interest they made from one of their investments. And this year was I did that. And it was like, it took a long time, but I did that. And I have a client who's a financial planner person and I'm now her client too. And I got to report that to her. I was like, oh my God, I did the thing that I never thought I could do. So that book was a game changer for me.
So wait, you're saying Rich Dad Poor Dad changed your life?
No, Cashflow Quadrant probably more than Rich Dad Poor Dad, but both of those two. I don't. Robert Kiyosaki, it's not that I like that whole brand, and I'm not necessarily into the whole thing, but some of the concepts in those books, regardless of whether or not they're rehashed from whatever, they taught me how to think differently about money. Think and Grow Rich. Obviously, a lot of us have learned from that book. Another big, huge one.
By the way, so sorry to sidetrack you, but tomorrow, if you're interested, I will. Sharon Lechter is my mentor. She actually co-authored Rich Dad Poor Dad.
Oh, I know. Yeah.
So I'll invite her up if you're okay with that. And say hi.
It's totally fine. I could
She
tell her
love
my
that
story.
You just said.
Yeah. Well, it's you when you're not wired that way and you're starting to read books like yours or like, his or whatever, you can just feel like, why bother? I'm so far behind. And that was the thing that happened to me all the time is I'd read people and I'd feel so embarrassed and ashamed for the way I'd managed things. But you have to start somewhere. And I started and I have built slowly and I bought the office space downtown that my company lived in, because when I was growing my company, I didn't want to be spending rent. And so I bought the office space when, everything was falling apart in 2010. And it was before I had a big enough team, but I did it because I could pay cash for it. And now that's, multiplied. I've looked at what happens when you multiply, but I still believe in that you are the most important investment. Like,
Do you think a lot of musicians have that same struggle? A lot of artists?
yes.
Because it seems to me that what you said was very powerful. It's like I notice a lot of them are so intimidated. They feel like you just said, I'm so behind. If
Yeah.
I get started now, what's the point, right? Which is the wrong attitude, but it's an attitude we have to admit is important to put on the chopping block and get rid of it, because it must be contagious. It's everywhere.
Well, I think it's because of, I think there's a lot of shame. And it's sort of what I mean, in my book, when I talk about secretly sensitive, I think people who are sensitive take on a lot of self-loathing kind of behaviors because they're taking on so much stuff. Their filters aren't out. They haven't learned how to think. And when I say something, one of the highest compliments I get from my clients is, you taught me how to think. And that's what I said about the Cashflow Quadrant. Some of my favorite books taught me how to think. And most of us are thinking from patterns. We're thinking from old patterns, old emotional wounds, old stuff that comes up, and we haven't learned how to get out of those patterns clearly enough to work with numbers and work with money, because shame is driving everything and all we want to do is avoid pain.
Mhm.
And so I think that's what you're pointing to here, is people, when they don't want to start, it's because they're so embarrassed or so ashamed or whatever, so they don't. And when you can teach somebody to walk through those sensitive things, those shameful things, the emotional things, to really face it, you've truly made a new human being in some ways. Because it's like, wow, because some people are wired that way. They just don't care. Like, it's all about the numbers and it's not personal, and stop thinking, and that's great for them. I love that. But when you're somebody who is a little bit more emotionally wired, it can be a huge, huge benefit to break through those things that have held you back and start looking at your money.
Thank you, Christine. Finish up that last question. Any other books you want to put in here before we move on?
God, so many. I'm like, I have so many, but
Maybe
those
one
are the
more.
two that stand out.
Okay, that's good.
Yeah, I'm trying. I have like a whole line of books on my shelf of all my money books. And those are the ones that came. Yeah, I'll stay with those ones.
Okay. Thank you. Appreciate it, Christine. All right. So we have a few more questions left and we'll wrap it up.
Okay.
Do we need money to survive?
Of course. Of course. So I do a lot of I go to a lot of silent retreats, and I do a lot of meditating, and I'm in a lot of spiritual, quote unquote, spiritual circles. And it's funny how the big spiritual bypass is to act like money is like I saw your quote today, and it's not the root of all evil, it's not the root of all good, but I do think we need it to survive. And I think that there is a certain amount of spiritual maturity that comes from not thinking of it as the root of all evil and seeing it as something that is just simply it's a channel. Money is a channel for our human and the human energy of commitment, and we put it into what we're committed to. Like, a lot of people like to see it as an energy, but I think of it as a way that our decisions, our commitment moves. And if you can see it as that and nothing more, like, it's like you're committed to this. Like, some people are committed to their big widescreen TVs and all their entertainment, and that's what they spend their money on. But I look at it as something much less highly charged than people have it. But in order to survive, absolutely. And your needs need to be met. And when somebody has a whole lot of emotion around money, I look at it as like, oh wow, what a great training ground for you then to go face that.
Yeah, that's a great point. All right. Thank you, Christine.
And I did have that, by the way, as an artist. I had to get through that. That was what my first coach really walked me through, was getting through my own fears around money. So,
You think a lot of artists have that same fear?
oh God, there's so much stuff around money in the art world and in the healing world, like healing practitioners a lot too. Like, there's a real fear of charging. There's a real fear of putting a higher price tag on yourself.
Mm-hmm.
There's a real fear of honoring the work you do by charging enough to hold, for you to thrive. Yes.
What I noticed was that most people who would say no to this question, which is is usually a very creative type. I guess you could call them the woohoos, but you know, they're more like into deep spirituality, and they're looking at money in the wrong way, kind of like the way you were talking about. Because like you said, I mean, money is basically just a tool. That's what I teach. It's just a tool. And their quote, to finish the quote that you had got from my book, you know, it's not the root of all evil. The people are the root of all evil. They're the ones using the money. It's not, it's the middle part of the process. The people are at the end of it controlling the money like puppet masters, right? So they're the ones who can do great or do really bad things. Part of my argument in the last book, Survival of the Richest, that like it's really the puppet masters of this world, the leaders, our leaders, can make good or bad depending on how they use their money, not the money itself.
Absolutely.
But, so you're saying mostly a lot of artists, people are saying, have that.
Well, I just think, you know, when someone's wired up as an artist, there's just a lot more sensitivity there. And then same thing with healers.
Yeah.
And it's not bad or good or whatever. It's just like, this is going to be your area of growth. That's all. And but I see a lot of fear, a lot of loathing around money. And I also see a lot of people who don't need it, and that's fine too. Like when they've really, I don't think you have to be a certain way around money, but when it triggers you and when you're scared to charge and when you're freaking out and you're judging people, there's some stuff there. And when you have stuff there, that's when it's really good to look within.
Now, you rubbed elbows with a lot of major musicians. Would you say that at the top of that food chain, people are like that too? Are major artists, major musicians, major influencers facing
Rubbing
that same
elbows
problem?
didn't mean we got into deep discussions. So when you're the opening act or something, they're like, "Hello, little funny thing." You go out and you perform, and okay, bye bye. Like I knew my place. I didn't get into deep money discussions with them, but I do know it was a common topic among artists and musicians. And I coach people in the arts as well, and so I know what a big deal it is.
I love your raw honesty. That's great. Thank you, Christine. All right. We have a few more questions. Is finance necessary for everyone? Why or why not? Sort of similar.
Yeah, I think if you have a business, for sure. I think it's worth being good at. Yes. And I also think that people have different styles with how they do it. I do think that in the financial world, there's a lot of people who, if we talk Colby's, like, so if you go do the Colby A index, a lot of the financial world people are going to be high fact finder, high follow through, which is the systems and the facts. They're not going to necessarily be the risk takers. Sometimes they will, but sometimes they won't. But a lot of times the entrepreneurs and the artists are not the highest fact finders, are not the highest follow throughs, but they're great risk takers. And a lot of times those are the people who got shamed by our financial institutions and financial advisors, because some people are wired a certain way and they think everyone should be fact finder follow through, and they don't honor the quick start, the risk taker, the artist. And so being able to bridge the gap is the issue here. The people who have been shamed their whole lives around how they manage their numbers, their finances, their conversion rates, whatever it might be, they need a little bit more compassion and a little bit more empathy, for that's what their style is. And so I always tell my clients who are financial advisors, they have to learn the Colbys, and they have to understand if they have entrepreneurial clients, they're going to be dealing with people who are not great at, necessarily, not always, sometimes they are, but not always great at numbers.
Beautiful. Thank you, Christine. All right. So here's a question I'm sure you'll enjoy. How important is having a purpose in business? And a follow-up to that is, what is your purpose?
I think we've gotten a little too addicted to purpose. I think that purpose, again, like I said, we have positioned it now as something you find and you grab and you pull down and you get your purpose or whatever. I think that purpose is just sort of like what we've talked about. It's mined for. It starts to evolve. You don't necessarily start off in your 20s knowing your purpose.
Yeah.
You learn it as you do things, and as you run into things and bump into edges, and you start to see what your gifts are. And to that end, I actually believe my experience of myself and my path is truly to catalyze people to their greatness from their seemingly imperfect starting points. And that's sort of been like, being a catalyst has been sort of a theme for me. I didn't even know it at first, but even as a musician, that's what was, I feel like I was calling people out of themselves all along.
You are cultivating people in their pre-purpose state.
Probably. Yeah, that's a good way to put it. Yeah.
To find their purpose.
Yes.
Yeah, I like that. I like, and you're absolutely accurate about the point that like most people might not have a purpose yet. You're too young, like maybe 20s, even 30s, even 40s, right? Like look at the guy for Kentucky Fried Chicken, the Colonel.
Yeah.
You know? He didn't know he was going to be what he became
I
until
think,
later on in life.
yeah, our life path can be whatever we make it, and it can start at any time.
Beautiful. Thank you, Christine. Well, what is your purpose though? Do you have one?
That's what I just said. It's like to
Oh,
catalyze. If I had to articulate it, I would say I'm a catalyst, and I catalyze people to their greatness from their
good.
seemingly imperfect starting point. Is how
Thank
I
you.
would
Sorry
put
about
it.
that.
Yeah,
Had a
no.
momentary lapse. All right. So two more questions left. What would you like to accomplish in the next 10 years or so, and why?
It's an interesting question. I don't do a whole lot of 10-year planning, and I don't do a lot of like, here's my next big thing. I really do let the doors open. And so I'm a little bit of a disappointment at that. And I don't know. Um, and I really just try to be open to the breakthroughs and the all the things that happen when we're following our life and our business and the doors that open. And especially in the last year since COVID started, I've realized, yeah, 3-year plans, 5 year. I used to be okay with the 3-year plan thing. Now I'm like, who freaking knows anymore? So I I'm gonna, my thing is just to keep being more and more present and keep serving in whatever way I know how. And sometimes that means I take a step back, and sometimes that means I move forward, and I kind of just follow the calling as it keeps moving.
So I guess you would agree with the old expression that God makes plans and
Wow. Yeah.
no, man makes plans and God
Yeah.
laughs, or
Kind of.
woman.
A little bit. Totally. Yeah. I kind of have seen that with myself as well. Like just, yeah. And I have the skylight starting to come in now.
It looks nice.
Thanks. It was really cloudy when we started. Normally I put a shade, I have the shade that goes over it, but we'll be closing out soon, so it won't get too bad.
All right, last question. So following up on that to a different degree, what legacy would you like to leave to this world?
God, I don't want to be this contrarian. I feel like I've just like every time you've asked a question, I've been like, I'm going to steer it over here instead. I don't do legacies because I don't think the ego is going to last after my death. I hope to God it doesn't. So if I leave a legacy, it would be, I hope that my nieces and that people I've impacted feel like they've been given permission to be themselves and live a very true, authentic life, and that sort of thing. But I don't necessarily think that after I die, I'm going to be worried about what legacy I left behind. I really don't. And that's just my own little spiritual thought
Well,
on the
while
whole
you're
thing.
alive, I mean, you said it right there. That's a good
Yeah.
legacy,
Yeah.
to impact your nieces and your
Totally. And
family.
I've had clients say that I've changed their lives, and that's enough for me. Just like the few of them that have said, working with you, knowing you, what you've done has just absolutely changed my life. And that's like, great. I love that. If I had some say in that, that's great. But I do believe that you did the work. So I love that. If my being the way I am, teaching how I do, can impact somebody, that's all that matters.
That's beautiful. I like it. All right, Christine. So we're going to start wrapping it up now. I'm going to leave the floor to you to make any closing statements. You can tell us anything you want. Tell us your website,
Okay.
where you want to send people, about 2 minutes or so, just anything you'd like to tell us. The floor is yours.
All right. Well, I think the biggest thing I would say is Soul Sourced Business Podcast. If you like what you heard, there's a lot there already. So you can find that there. And I think the other thing would be my book is called The Soul Sourced Entrepreneur, and it's on Amazon. And as we're recording this, it's on sale on Amazon. They do that without telling me, but now it's on sale. And if you just want to get the tools from the book, like you can, like there's a whole suite of tools that come with the book. You can go to soulsourcedbook.com, and that is where you can just download the tools that came in the book that are little habits and clarity bringers and all the kinds of things for managing what I call managing your power. And that's where I would point people to. And my website's christinekane.com. And my music, if you're now interested, based on the kind of things that Tony said, is on iTunes. It's Christine Kane, Kane.
Christine Kane. Okay. Well, thank you, Christine. I appreciate it. And I hope you don't mind following behind. John David Mann is actually finally coming to our podcast next
Awesome.
week. So yeah, finally we
I'm
got him
honored
here.
to be wedged in between Mark Victorance and John David Mann. I just need a third name to add to
And
that.
Daniel Burness.
There we
Daniel
go.
Burris. He was
Yes,
here.
there we
Yeah.
go.
He's over
Awesome.
1.2 million followers, I think,
Wow.
on LinkedIn or something like that.
Love that.
Well, thank you, Christine. Okay, so folks, we're going to close out now. This is you've been watching the Dr. Finance Live podcast. This is Dr. Anthony Criniti IV, also known as Dr. Finance. We had our wonderful guest here, Christine Kane. If you want to see her tomorrow, she will be live on Clubhouse in our room. So check us out over there. Just follow the link at the bottom of our bios, and that will take you straight to the room between 7 and 9 p.m. Eastern time. I'll probably kick it off about an hour or two before. So thank you again, everyone. Have a wonderful day, and we'll see you on the next episode. Bye-bye now.
Thanks, Tony.
Thank you, Christine.